Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here, and welcome to the Canon EOS C100 video tutorial series. In this video, we're going to be talking about setting up the camera and getting ready for shooting. Let's get started. Okay, so now we're going to talk about timecode on the EOS C100, and we need to do that in the timecode user bit setup menu. If we go into timecode here, we have a few options. At the moment, we have this set to record run, and record run will record consecutive timecode based on the start and stop of your camera system. But there are two options when doing that. If we go up to mode and we choose regen, then regen will actually look at the timecode off of your SD card and make sure that it's consecutively recording timecode based on start stop. So if you had an SD card that was in the camera system and it read 3 minutes on it, then it would look at this if it was set to regen, and it would make sure it started timecode at 3 minutes when you press start on your camera system. If I go into preset, we can actually decide where the timecode starts, and you'll see that down here in the setting area. So under setting, by default, that's set to 0. If you want to make sure that it's set to 0 because you're putting fresh cards in the camera and you're doing record run, you can just go over to reset, and regardless of what the timecode is that reads here, if you press reset, it will make sure that it is set to 0 on the camera system. But we also have this other option in here, which is called free run. And free run is a continuous timecode. It's not based on the start stop of your camera system. You can set it to 0, but most of the time when we're using free run, we'll actually set it to the time of day. So we'll go down to setting here, and we will set it to the time of day. So we'll click set, and right now it is about 11:50 in the morning. So I'm going to go to 11:50, and then I go over here to set, and if you take a look up here in the top right, as soon as I press set, it will change that time code to the setting that I put in there, and now we are recording free run time code based on the time of day. Now, that's great when you're doing multi-camera shoots, so you've got 2 or 3 C100s. If you set them all to the same time of day into free run, if you're shooting an event or a concert or something like that, it's very easy to see when the camera operators were starting and stopping their cameras, and it really helps the editor in post-production. So now that we've taken a look at timecode, we're going to jump out of that and we're going to take a look at the other functions menu. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the assign button function in here. So we're going to go down to assign button, and there are a number of buttons, 15 in all, on the camera body that can be assigned a function. All of these buttons that you see that have numbers on them are assignable, and there are a bunch right over here which are our transport controls, which are 1 through 6, which I'm going to assign some of them to do certain jobs. What I want to do is go in here and select this. I'm going to choose number 1 and select it with the joystick, and then I'm going to, you can scroll up or down depending on what you're trying to get to, but I know that the option that I want, photo, is near the bottom of the list, so by scrolling up I can get to it faster, which is really cool. I like that on the camera. I'm going to choose photo, I'm going to select it, and now we've assigned taking a photograph to the number 1 button here on the transport controls. Now what I'm going to do is take buttons number 3 right here and buttons number 6 on the transport controls, and I'm going to assign them to the headphone plus and headphone minus options. I have headphones plugged into this headphone terminal almost all of the time when I'm shooting with this camera, and because it's so ideal as a sort of single operator camera system, it's going to be great for you to be monitoring your audio in those situations, but you may want to adjust your headphone levels. So I'm going to scroll down here to number 3, and then I'm going to find headphone plus and assign that to, there it is, to number 3, and then I'm going to go down to number 6 and scroll down here, and I'm going to find headphone minus, and then we'll step out of this. I now have headphone plus, headphone minus, and then of course for button number 1, photo. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the fan parameters in the camera system, and there's only 2 of them. There's automatic and on. When I turn it on, the fan will kick in on the camera system and it'll run continuously to keep the camera cool. If I change it to automatic, what will happen is the fan will immediately go off unless you're in a very, very hot environment, and it'll stay off unless it gets to critical levels in terms of heat. So if you're shooting an interview, definitely want to use automatic, especially in a closed environment, to make sure that you're not picking up that fan noise from the camera system. But if you're shooting MOS without sound, you're out in the field and things like that, where that's not an issue, especially in warmer climates, then it makes sense to have the camera fan on. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at system frequency. So when we're talking about using the C100, if we want to use that camera system in an NTSC based country, or we're shooting for NTSC, then we would make sure that's set to 59.94. If we were in a PAL situation, we would change the camera to 50 Hertz. And when we do that, it's obviously going to change the frame rate options that we have on the camera system. So let's talk about our recording options with the camera system. Right here, underneath the LCD, we have the SD card compartment cover. When we lift that up, we can access the two SD card slots here, and then we have to make sure that that's closed in order to record to the camera system. And there's a couple of ways that we can record here. At the moment, I have the camera set to double slot recording, and this is a great feature because with two cards inside of the camera system, if I look up here on the monitor, we'll see this D symbol here. That means that when I press record on the camera, it is recording the same data to both cards, so it creates a backup automatically when you're recording. Now, if I turn double slot recording off, I can go up to relay recording and I can activate that. By turning relay recording on, it will record to the first card, and then when that card fills up, it will go to the other card slot. You can decide which card you want to start with, but most of the time when we're recording, we would start with A and then we would go to B. I'm going to actually set this back now to double slot recording. It's one of the ways that I like to shoot with the camera, especially when recording to the SD cards with AVC HD. We get very, very long record times on SD cards. In fact, with the 32 gigabyte cards in here, I'm getting 174 minutes at the best quality on the camera. So double slot recording makes total sense because I always have a backup when I'm shooting in the field. I don't have to think about workflow until the end of the day. So let me go down here to the next menu option, another important one here, which is bit rate. The first option is 24 megabits per second LPCM, and this is the highest quality recording to the SD cards. It's 24 megabits per second. It is uncompressed audio, which is at 16-bit 48 kilohertz. That's the industry standard. In almost every situation when shooting with the camera system, this is what you would use. But we do have some other options. These other three options, 24, 17, and 7, all use Dolby Digital Audio as a compressed format. And they are also, when you get down to 17 and 7 megabits per second, recording at a lower bit rate. Most situations you wouldn't do that because we get such long recording times on these SD cards. But for instance, if you were shooting, let's say, a legal deposition and you wanted to make sure you had very, very long recording times, you could set this to 17 or 7 megabits per second when image quality was not paramount, and you would get extremely long recording times with those lower bit rates on the camera. So we're going to step out now and we're going to go down to frame rate. Right now the camera is set to NTSC, so we're going to talk about those frame rates. They'll of course be different when you're shooting in PAL. And here we have 24p. This is the most common frame rate that people are going to shoot with if they want a true progressive recording at 23.98 or 23.976. We also have PF24 and PF30. These formats are really used when you want to shoot with a progressive look. And this would be, for instance, let's say PF24, you have a client and they don't want to go through a conversion process and you're shooting for something that may be going to broadcast television. So you shoot PF24, you would hand off the files to them, they would have that in a 60i stream, and they could just go ahead and drop that into a timeline. Again, 24p for that cinematic look in most situations. And then if you have a client who is shooting for broadcast and they want a 60i or interlaced signal, we can choose 60i here on the camera system. We're going to scroll down and take a look at a couple of the other options. This one is really important to me. It's the custom function area. If I go in here, I can do some really, really cool stuff. And for me, where it is most applicable is for this button right here, which is our magnification button on the grip unit. And I am going to change my focus assist to black and white for when I magnify the camera system. So you'll see focus assist black and white, and then I'm going to go ahead and choose magnify. And then when I step out of my menu and I use this magnify button, my image will actually go to a black and white image as opposed to a color image, which is really, really great when you're trying to get critical focus because your contrast tends to be a little bit better. I can also go in and say when I'm magnifying that I want to add something to the magnification, and I can choose either the peaking feature in the camera system or the edge monitor, which is also a great feature in here. I'm going to turn on peaking and press the magnify button again, and you'll see that now we're magnifying and peaking will be turned on, and of course because I activated black and white, it'll be a black and white image with the peaking function in the camera. So that's really it in terms of the other functions menu and setting up your camera system. We're going to take a look at one more thing, which is choosing a custom picture profile to get you ready before you go shooting, and we'll do that right now. On the side of the C100 you'll see custom picture, this dedicated button. I'm going to press that, and as soon as we do that we get the custom picture menu. So I want to talk about one particular custom picture, but I'll also give you just a quick overview of what's inside of here. We're going to scroll down to set, press the joystick in, and we have to change it from off to camera, and then select, and as soon as we select that, we can now cycle through the different custom pictures in the camera system. Right now I have the camera set to CP1, so we're going to scroll up here and take a look at a couple of these. So here we have EOS Standard, which is a custom picture on the C100 that closely matches what we have for the standard picture style on the EOS HD cameras. Then we'll scroll up here and we have a new custom picture which is part of the EOS C100 called WDR, or Wide Dynamic Range. A really fantastic custom picture because what it does is it allows you to shoot with a curve on the image that approximates Rec 709. So whereas when we go up here to Cinema and we're using Canon log as our gamma curve, and we have to really think about a much flatter image which is going to have to be graded in post-production. When we use WDR, we're actually shooting with a curve that, while it has a lot of dynamic range, produces an image that once you've edited it, you don't really have to grade it if you don't want to, as long as your camera is properly exposed and white balance and things like that. So this is really a great way to shoot, and I'm actually going to lock that in right now as our custom picture. There's a whole bunch of other options that we have that we'll talk about in another video, and when I step out of the custom picture menu, on my display here you will see that it says CP8. CP8 is WDR, and so I know that I'm using that custom picture. So now that we've actually set up the camera system and it's ready for shooting, in the next video we're going to talk about actually shooting with the camera.